All right, everybody. So you know how Z's kind of coming on every morning, and like probably to my own detriment, I just keep telling you that this world that's been presented to you, the science that's been presented to you, the cosmology, very fundamental nature of this realm that's been presented to you, seems to be somewhat of a maybe a little fib. One might say a lie. Others might say it's a deception on such a grand scale that it defies all comprehension. I don't know. But either way, when I look at this realm, and I look at what they tell me, and I compare it to what I experience, what I know, well, I see a discrepancy. A rather obvious discrepancy to me. But for whatever reason, this thing that I seem to be able to see so clearly is so obscured from the masses. To the point where I have to consistently ask myself, well, am I the one that's off? And let me check my beliefs, my understandings. Let me try to falsify the things that I accept as true in reality. And the more that I try to falsify these things, the more I'm just convinced that no, indeed, we are being presented here with a large-scale deception. The more I try to prove the reality that they're presenting to me, the more I find that it cannot be proven. What do you mean, Z? What do you mean, Z? Well, they're telling you live somewhere. They're telling you that they know. Who's they? Who's they? Who's they? Well, that's a whole nother show. How's this? They's not you. There's you. There's those that you know, those in your vicinity, your family, your community, your loved ones, people that you can interact with. And then there's, they. But they keep telling us about our world. They keep telling us that they know what this place is. They tell you, well, we had an eclipse recently, solar eclipse. Well, we know what that is. We know what causes it. They tell you they know what causes the seasons. And they tell you you live on a very large spinning water ball that somehow is rotating, orbiting a fusion gas ball that exists in a near-perfect vacuum. They keep telling you that, to the point where anybody who questions it is considered insane, archaic. But when I try to prove this audacious claim, when I try to prove it to myself, I keep coming up short. You see, guys, I'm not trying to prove what I believe. Because when I tell you that I see a level, horizontal realm, a world that shows no convexity at large scales, well, I'm not trying to prove that to myself. I came to that particular understanding because I tried to prove what they're telling me. But alas, no proof. And along those lines, let's go into my next segment. I'm going to bring you a clip today. And this clip is going to reference a very interesting piece of military artillery. It's called a railgun. Okay, the U.S. Navy has a piece of artillery called a railgun. It's a quite interesting weapon for many reasons. But Z's bringing you this information this morning for one particular reason that I find of great interest. You see, this weapon is basically a cannon, everybody. Just a really advanced one. This cannon shoots projectiles, large projectiles, in reference to, let's say, in comparison to, say, like a bullet. Basically like a big gun. We call big guns cannons. But again, this one doesn't work off explosive, it works off electromagnetism. This large cannon that shoots a projectile that weighs about 7 pounds, again, is quite interesting to me. because this particular cannon is able to shoot this particular projectile up to 115 miles line of sight. That's right. Z said it to you. You heard it here. No, what does that mean, Z? So what? Who cares? Well, it might not matter to you, but I find it particularly interesting, especially in reference to today's conversation. Because when I say to you that I'm trying to prove the globe that they keep telling you that you live on, when I try to prove the globe, well, when I see something called the Railgun cannon that could shoot a projectile line of sight 115 miles, that kind of raises a red flag for me. Because I know a little bit about math, and I know they say this globe is roughly 25,000 miles in circumference at the equator. Roughly 24,901, but who's counting? Anyway, let's just call it 25,000. So if we live in a globe, a perfectly spherical globe that's 25,000 miles in circumference at the equator, well, that tells me a little bit of something, because I can use those numbers to very easily figure out what the curvature rate should be on that globe, on that bendy water globe. And when I do so, I find that there should be a physical horizon at a certain distance, right? And then I know that based off that calculation, that globe, we could find what's called an R, or a radius value. Based off the radius, we could easily see that, well, at 115 miles in distance, we should see a drop rate of over 1.5 miles. What do you mean, Z? What do you mean, Z? What I'm saying is, well, I'll put it like this. I'll ask a question. If you live on a globe with a circumference at the equator at 25,000 miles, how can you have a cannon that can hit a target line of sight 115 miles away when that target should be obscured by over 1.5 miles of Earth curvature? I don't know. Maybe you could answer the question. Either way, let's get into it.
This is the US military's most powerful cannon, the electromagnetic railgun, which can shoot up to 100 nautical miles at Mach 7.5 and impacting the target at Mach 5, using only energy as its propellant. The high-velocity projectile will destroy land, sea and air targets purely from its kinetic energy, rather than with conventional explosive warheads. So what is a railgun? Well,
Look at that son of a bitch. Hey guys, this isn't theory. You want to talk about advancements in human technology? You want to talk about human ingenuity? You want to talk about real-life applied physical science? I'm not talking about the bullshit space shuttle that they're telling you was going into low Earth orbit, shuttling people up that they retired in 2011. That's completely stupid. It defies all logic in terms of engineering, its engineering capabilities. I'm not talking about these impossible probes that go to the moon, into deep space, that apparently return soil samples from distant asteroids. I'm talking about evidenced, real-life, demonstrable, applied physical engineering. You understand? This is a marvel in engineering. I want you to really think about it. This thing that we're looking at shoots a 7-pound projectile 115 miles. I know they said 100 nautical miles. You could do the math. That's 115 miles as we know them. Line of sight. Are you comprehending what I'm telling you, people? Imagine a gun that could shoot 115 miles. I want you to think of wherever you are right now on this earth. I want you to picture a place that's 115 miles from you. I want you to think about how far that is, really. And then imagine that the thing you're looking at right now fires a projectile, not a rocket, just a fucking hunk of metal, an aerodynamically designed hunk of metal like a bullet, 115 miles. Let's continue.
The EM Railgun launcher is a long-range weapon that fires projectiles using electricity instead of chemical propellants like gunpowder. Magnetic fields created by high electrical currents accelerate a sliding metal conductor or armature between two rails to launch projectiles at 4,500 miles per hour. Basically, it shoots a big solid metal projectile at very high speeds at vast distances and does damage using kinetic energy, only using electricity to shoot.
Let's look at this. The Tomahawk cruise missile, which again is self-propelled, right? It's a missile. It uses rocket technology to propel itself. It travels 550 miles an hour. It's about what an airplane travels, give or take. Look at the speed of sound, everybody, which is 768 miles per hour on average. That's called Mach. If you exceed that, you've reached Mach. Mach 1 would be that. An artillery shell, which is basically a standard cannon shell, which is powered by, let's say, explosive technology. It's explosive. That travels at about 2,000 miles an hour. Now you have this railgun projectile. 5,600 miles an hour. You should think about how incredibly fast that is. It's not traveling that fast up in the upper stratosphere where the air is thin, thus less resistance. It's doing it here right on ground level. The kinetic energy generated from this machine is incredible. But again, what's the point of this morning? It's because this machine can hit a target at 115 miles distance, line of sight. And Z's telling you that at 115 miles, there should be over 1.5 miles of Earth curvature in the way. You get it? There should be a big hunk of Earth or water or anything if you live on the globe that they purport. To be exact, 8,729 feet of curvature, of drop at 115 miles. Think about how big that is. I've hiked mountains that aren't that tall. Let's continue.
The railgun works by storing power for several seconds, generated from an external source, like a ship. After the weapon is charged with some 32 megajoules of energy, its capacitors send an electrical pulse down two long rails, one negatively charged and one positively charged, generating an electromagnetic field that fires the projectile along the two rails at up to Mach 7. Using extreme speed, the warhead impacts with high kinetic energy, ripping a hole through whatever it was aimed at. The 25-pound projectile is a non-explosive bullet, like a big dart, inside an aluminium alloy casing or sabot that falls away after the projectile leaves the barrel. The greatest advantage of an EM railgun on a naval vessel over traditional explosive round weapons is the safety aspect, as no propellant is required to fire the projectile, and no explosive rounds are stored in the ship's magazine.
Did you see that bad boy? That's engineering that I can get behind. I'm not interested when you show me your Artemis rocket. Well, your Falcon rocket, Mr. Elon Musk, and your Dragon capsule that apparently has gone to and from the ISS like 8 or 9 times. I'm not super impressed with that because I'm not really convinced that that's, real. But I can plainly see that this is real. So when Z comes on here each morning and he tries to tell you that when you try to prove the cosmology that they're presenting us and our children, when you try to prove what they're presenting in academia and education in regards to our world, when you try to prove it, it falls apart. Because there are no proofs of the globe. There's no proofs of the heliocentric model. There's no proof that the Earth is moving in any way whatsoever. There's no proof that water and oceans bend to form a globe. And in reality, all proofs show the complete opposite. They show a level, horizontal, motionless world. The world that you experience, the world that you could observe, the world that you could measure, and the world that you can test repeatedly. That's the world that is shown. So as they get you to try to believe in theories that go against all objective reality, as they continue to do this, I want you to ask yourself, why? Why are they presenting you with a world that goes against all common sense, all logic, reasoning, and all of your divinely given, God-given critical thinking skills? And if you come up with an answer, let me know, because this is what I think about constantly.